The latest, in the 16th century, the 5 uninhabited islands of Japanese Senkaku group had each name in Chinese. But this doesn't mean these islands belong to China. Why? Let's see a very good answer. In 1670, Ogasawara Island, which had belonged to Japan since 1876, located about 1,000 kilometers to southeast from Tokyo, were discovered by Japanese. In 1675, Japanese aid government named this island Bunin Island, which means uninhabited islands, and set up a Japanese landmark after having dispatched a ship for survey. The name Ogasawara started much later. In 1817, a Spanish ship came to these islands and called them Bonin Islands. That is a little metamorphosed form, Bunin. In 1827, Britain declared possession of these islands, emphasizing that Japan had never ruled over these islands as a territory. That is, these islands were considered as ownerless land. Then USA also took further steps for trying to possess them. Some other great powers at that time, such as Russia, Germany, were also interested in these islands. Meanwhile, Japan claimed that it was Japan who discovered the islands, that it was Japan who named Bunin Islands, and that Japan set up Japanese landmark. Nevertheless, the great powers insisted there was no evidence on Japanese effective control. They began to try to occupy according to the doctrine of terra nullius. But prompting conflict among the great powers, and thanks to Japanese great efforts with witty actions, finally Japan succeeded in repossession of Ogasawara in 1875. Here we can see that discovery or naming or even setting up landmark is insufficient for possessing land as territory. In 1885, Japanese Meiji government began survey of uninhabited small islands near Okinawa called Senkaku Group afterward. The reasons why the survey was begun were that there was a Japanese private citizen who wanted business around the islands, and the government wanted to know whether the islands were ownerless land or not. It's quite understandable that Japan was interested in ownerless lands after having repossessed Ogasawara, considered ownerless land, by great powers, and having been going to possess some newly discovered ownerless lands. The Minister of Interior found out that despite the name in Chinese, there was no evidence on effective control, and that these islands served just for a beacon according to some documents about navigation, mainly for trade between Okinawa and China. On the other hand, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, putting priority on the international relationship, recommended further survey taking account of rumor in China that Japan was going to occupy these Chinese islands near Taiwan. It's very important that the Minister of Foreign Affairs did not admit that the islands belonged to China, but was aware of the rumor in journal. Concerning to the private citizen, he started his business, marine product industry, in the islands, and developed it around 1890. So much that Okinawa Prefecture asked for the government's permission to control his business, because Japan had not yet declared the position of these islands. In 1893, Okinawa Prefecture asked again for the permission. During these years, there was no objection nor protest from Chinese government. Japanese government surveys may have been done in secret, but how can it be possible that marine product industry, even if it was very small, could have been done and developed in secret? If China had had strict ground superior to just naming in Chinese and effective control for the possession, China should have manifested any protest against the Japanese activities on business and have taken immediate action to maintain the sovereignty like Japanese actions for Ogasawara. Did China forget the rumor in 1885, saying that Japan intended to occupy the island in Chinese general? If China had not been aware of this private business activity, it signified that China was not interested in these islands. Finally, Japanese government gave permission to Okinawa Prefecture to control the business and declared possession of the islands in 1895. Before, of course, and after 1885, no protest came from China. Thus Japan obtained quietly and perfectly ownerless lands according to the doctrine of terra nullius. China lost a chance to execute the doctrine that China also could have done if it had wished. On the other hand, a Chinese document in the 17th century described that the Senkaku Islands are attached to Taiwan. But what does it mean, the word attached? At least there is no definition concerning the relation between or among islands in the present international law. Does it mean a topographic relation? If it's so, China must comprehend that topography and territorial sovereignty are quite different. Does it mean an administrative relation? But Taiwan was not Chinese territory at that time of the document, so the premise on the administrative relation doesn't exist. After all, the word attached serves nothing. 8 years later, from the beginning of Japanese effective control, China suddenly began to claim the Senkaku Islands when petrol was discovered in the area.